But first, we have a two top story edition for you this morning, coming from Alan Adler, and it starts with Locomation getting a new customer. And that may be with or without some needed testing. Alan joins us now. Alan, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Good morning, guys. Nice to see you all. Never spent any time with you.
Nice to see you as well, Alan.
So Locomation, interesting that they're continuing to stack up customers. This is their fourth customer now. This is the longest contract that we've seen them sign for basically what is their autonomous relay convoys. These are two truck platoons, basically. They don't like that word, by the way, but platooning is what this amounts to. This is electronically tethered trucks where you have a human driver in the first truck, and for now, a human driver in the second truck who is resting. They go on a certain route for 11 hours or up to 11 hours, which is what's allowed under the hours of service. And then they switch, and the driver of the first truck goes into the second truck. So basically the truck keeps moving, the convoy, if you will. You've got twice as much freight, you're covering twice as much ground, and you're staying within regulations. This all sounds good. It's very different from what we mostly write about in the autonomous space, where we're talking about sort of hub-to-hub movement of goods, with, at least right now, safety drivers, eventually no one in the cab. And that really is Locomotion's long-term plan, is to remove the drivers as well. But for right now, Locomation has yet to start really testing. I think they've done some localized testing, but these four customers all have pretty good plans, and the setup that Locomation is proposing, which is picking certain routes and really increasing the density on those routes, is where this ends up making sense.
It's really interesting that we bring up the story this week. Last week, we had Finch Fulton on from Locomation talking about the National Transportation Safety Board visit to Locomation to kind of get their proof of concept. So, Alan, I'm interested in hearing what you have to think about what they showed NTSB versus now what they're proving to their customers, that they don't necessarily have the testing to prove that proof of concept yet. Are they just kind of running their technology and hoping for the best?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions about Locomation, and one of them is, where's the money coming from? We don't know, because they haven't really announced any kind of funding. They skipped the SPAC wave. That is, they did not end up, coming public through a special purpose acquisition company. So there's a lot of things we don't know. We know there's really smart people there. That much we do know. But what we don't know is just, where the business plan gets funded, how it gets funded. I mean, we're seeing it all over the place right now, and we'll talk about this next week with Vince Cubbage on our summit, Autonomous Electric Vehicle Summit, about where the money's coming from to keep some of these businesses going, especially as we head into what could be dour economic times. That's your department over there, Anthony, not mine. But I will tell you that there's some question about where the money's coming from. So I think that's something that's a mystery for me anyway, where Locomation is concerned. I do think that it's an interesting technology. We've written about it. And of course, Ashley Coker and others on our team have written about it. But I think we really do need to see this in action, right? To see what's going to happen.
And Alan, as you mentioned, finances and money, when we look into some of that, what's kind of detailed in this latest deal with Locomation?
Nothing. There was no. I couldn't make it more clear. There were no financial terms announced. That's not surprising, though, really, that they would not announce that. But I think the length of the agreement is interesting because it suggests that there is some long-term planning going on. And I think it's just going to be a question of, being able to have enough trucks. And ultimately, I suspect Locomation won't be using its own trucks. They're going to be asset light in that sense. It's going to be, the carrier's trucks, like in this case, Stevens has about 500 trucks that they would presumably use on. There's 4 routes that have been identified, mostly in the Southwest, which is a popular area for autonomous trucking. So again, until we see some of the actual testing, it's going to be hard to know what we're going to be looking at. But again, if you take it on faith, Locomation's business does appear to be expanding, absent the testing and maybe some of the financial understanding of what's behind it.
So, Alan, you know that Locomation has the tandem model, which I think is really interesting when you talk about load planning and how you actually are going to get that freight from point A to point B, right? Because if you've got two trucks that are running in convoy with each other, obviously you have to now load plan so that way you have freight that's either going to the same or a similar destination when you do that handoff eventually. Is this going to put some stress on maybe the farther side of the business model when you're talking about load planning and trying to get that freight to match up with each other, or are they just not thinking about that yet?
Well, I think the whole goal for many of these companies that are signing on is that they see opportunity to grow their market share on these lanes where they can move freight more densely, like you say, tandem trucks and that sort of thing. They look to presumably have enough business out there and the opportunity for new business that they can, make this go. Again, until we see this in action, it's going to be really hard to assess it. We don't know that much about the other autonomous companies, except we have seen them test their trucks, continue to test their trucks in case they're too simple without a driver and things like that. So we see a little bit more of how that technology might play out. But again, these are early days. And even though we write about it every week, we're really early in knowing how this is going to work out. It does feel like there's some betting to come, if you will, on Locomation and on its customers in terms of, because no one's going to give up market share easily. That's usually a very expensive thing to acquire. So, the density makes a lot of sense. I don't know anything about mixed loads, whether, one trailer might be for one destination, one might be for another. There's some things that have to get worked out for sure.
Definitely a lot of things that have to be worked out. Excuse me. And Alan, as we look at this technology, as you mentioned, there's still a lot of questions that haven't been answered yet. But if this proves successful, do you see potentially other companies trying to follow this model, or would Locomation just be too far ahead from a technology standpoint to really be caught or kind of copied?
Anthony, that's a good question. A few years ago, platooning, again, that's what this is most commonly known as, was pretty big. But then in 2019, Martin Dahm, the head of Daimler Truck, said, we're done with that. We're not going to pursue it any further. That led a lot of people to exit the business. There was a company that was really planning to make its bones this way. They went out of business, or stopped their operations. So right now, Locomation, again, rebranding it, renaming it as Autonomous Relay Convoy and kind of staying clear of the platooning tag, is really the only one that I'm aware of that's doing this with any kind of a meaningful kind of a national plan sort of thing. I don't see others following it. I think if it's going to succeed, Locomation is going to get the credit for that. If it doesn't, they're going to go away. And again, right now, we just don't know who's going to make it long term anyway. But I think that, they are staking their bet on one particular way of doing this, as opposed to, 6 or 7 others that we're aware of that are pursuing, the hub-to-hub autonomous trucking.
It's a fight to the death for the autonomous freight model. It's going to be interesting to watch. Alan, let's move on to our second topic of the morning really quickly, talking about some computer modules being stolen out of Freightliner Cascadias. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we wrote about this back in May, and actually, to their credit, I think, Daimler announced it. They said, we've got this problem and we need help, and we're going to do everything we can to stop it. But the thieves are breaking into Freightliner Cascadia trucks, typically 2018 and older trucks, and they are stealing the computer control module that basically operates the vehicle. They're not hard to get at if you know what you're looking for. And so there have been, about 340 cases, according to Daimler, in terms of that they're aware of, that have been reported to them. Back in May, we reported a couple of rather large, bold thefts, including 24 trucks hit at one time that were waiting in an auction site in Pennsylvania. I tried to find out if the police had any success on that. It didn't get back to me, at least not yet. But Daimler said, hey, we know that there have been some recoveries made. We know that, they say is slowing down, although those numbers going from about 175 that they reported back in May to 340 now might suggest otherwise. And we continue to hear from mostly owner-operators who are getting hit. A couple from California that are in our update story out there on freightwaves.com, who reported, that they were hit. One didn't even know this problem was going on until she became a victim. And I think the issue probably doesn't fully resolve itself. Daimler's not replacing these. That's not really their responsibility, because these are typically used trucks that are being hit anyway. They are doing their best to keep up with what's happening in terms of this. If one of them shows up at a dealership, one of the modules shows up, they're checking it against, a stolen list and things like that. So they're working with law enforcement. They're doing what they can, but unfortunately, it's not one of these things that's just going to disappear someday.
Alan, bringing us two great top stories. Thanks so much for your coverage on this, and we'll be sure to follow up with you as these stories develop. And again, throughout the rest of this week, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day.
All right. And if you haven't gotten registered for that AV EV Summit yet, just know that Alan, I think, has a total of 6 sessions, including our keynote for that day. So you definitely don't want to miss what he's going to be talking about all day Wednesday of next week. Head over to live.freightwaves.com to get registered for that one. We're going to toss it on over to the wall right now. We've got our first carrier update of the morning.